So a pretty big story broke over the weekend that I want to share with you guys. Bill Barr, who of course was in the Trump administration, he did an interview with Fox News, and he's going to hammer Trump for taking the classified documents. And he's going to make some interesting points here. So Barr, very famously, didn't give a fuck about protecting Trump's feelings when it came to discussing the fraudulent election claims. You know, he came out and said, look, we investigated it, we looked into it, there's no merit to any of these claims that the election was rigged, and that's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't like it, go kick rocks. That was his stance. And Trump went nuts after that. Apparently, you know, he was throwing his food against the wall, shattering plates, yelling at Barr that he's fired or whatever. And this was all reported. And Barr was like, all right, whatever. But he never backed down. And Barr was a chief opponent of Russiagate, which, by the way, he was right on. But he was also a chief opponent of Trump with the rigged election stuff. Again, he's also right on that. So here he's asked his opinion on the classified documents and the new information that just came out about how there were empty folders and stuff like that. Let's see what he says.
He claims that he had a standing order to declassify anything that he took out of the White House when he left in January of 2021. Is there any legitimate reason for those materials to be in the former president's possession?
No. I can't think of a legitimate reason why they should have.
By the way, that is classic Bill Barr. He's a guy who ideologically I would disagree with on 95% of things, but he certainly is straightforward. Is there any reason for Trump to have these documents? No. Well, thank you for being like one of the only people on the right who doesn't twist themselves into an intellectual pretzel, or should I say an anti-intellectual pretzel, to try to rationalize Trump's actions.
Could be taken out of the government, away from the government, if they're classified. I frankly am skeptical of this claim that I declassified everything, because frankly, I think it's highly improbable. And second,
also, there's a process. When you declassify something, it's not like I just hereby declassify them. No, there's stuff you got to do. There's a process you have to go through. It's not as simple as just like waving your presidential wand. I hereby declassify. It's not how it works. That's not how it works. That was always a flippant argument that was glib, that was arrogant, and it's untrue. And it's a last-ditch effort to try to say, please don't come after me because I did these things that were obviously illegal.
In fact, he sort of stood over scores of boxes, not really knowing what was in them, and said, I hereby declassify everything in here. That would be such an abuse and show such recklessness that it's almost worse than taking the documents.
To that point, though, there's some questions.
Wow. So it's actually worse than taking the documents in the first place to, after the fact, say, no, I just bulk declassified all of them. And what's his reasoning? He says, because that's reckless. That's reckless. You took all these classified documents. You're not going through them with a fine-tooth comb. You're not determining, hey, what should actually be declassified and what should stay classified. You're just, for self-serving purposes, saying, no, I've decided these are all A-okay for me to have, even the ones that are the top secret of the top secret, even potential nuclear documents. Even though I have empty folders where I either lost stuff or sold it, it's all fine, it's all good, it's all perfect. It's the perfect declassification, really, if you ask me.
Over the timeline. And there are some who fall in the camp of this was, looking at the unprecedented nature of a raid of a former president's home like this, that perhaps there was more room for the authorities to obtain these materials without raiding the president's home while...
I love this. One of these things that you see on the right-wing outlets time and time again now is how they just ignore the facts of what actually happened, and they bring up these objections that are so powerless, so nebbish. Well, why didn't they just, ask him nicely, and then maybe he would have given the documents up? They did ask him. They put on their kid gloves, and they asked him very kindly, repeatedly, hey, just so you know, you have these documents, we need them back, so can you help us out? They visited Mar-a-Lago in June to say these things, to make these arguments. And Trump said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And then he only gave up some of them. He didn't give up all of them. They knew he didn't give up all of them because they had somebody internally in Trump's inner circle who was like, he didn't give up all of them. Look, my suspicion is one of Trump's lawyers is the rat because Trump had his lawyer sign a document saying, yeah, we turned over all the stuff and sent it to the FBI and the DOJ. As soon as that lawyer realized, hey, you didn't turn over everything, now they think I'm legally liable. I'm on the hook because I signed a letter saying he turned everything over, and he didn't. So the lawyer probably was like, oh shit, now I'm going to cooperate with the authorities. And that's the rat. That's the mole from within the campaign. That's my guess. That's what I think is going on here. But either way, I mean, the Fox News host, not knowing the basic facts of how this unfolded or knowing and lying about it, I think she genuinely doesn't know. Because these guys aren't privy to all the information because they only hear the bits and pieces that are cherry-picked to feed their own narrative. So she's like, well, why didn't they ask nicely? I mean, wasn't there room to get this back other ways? They tried. They absolutely tried, knowing how big of a deal it is that here you're dealing with a former president of the United States of America. Of course, that's going to be a big deal if you raid their place.
He was not even there. Do you think this type of this raid was?
He wasn't there because they planned it for when he's not there because they didn't want to embarrass him. So she spun that as if that was something that was more nefarious and more anti-Trump that they did. It was pro-Trump. It was trying to be as kind to him as possible. Look, we won't do it when you're there. You can be out of town, etc. We'll save him the embarrassment of having to stand there while FBI agents go through his stuff and having that on camera or whatever.
Was avoidable? Do you think a second subpoena, for example, could have been issued?
Second subpoena?
Well, I think whether the raid was reasonable under the circumstances, whether there's in fact a case to be made, and whether or not, as a matter of prudential judgment, that case should be brought depend on two questions. The character of those top secret documents and secret documents, how sensitive were they? And
again, the top secret of the top secret. Look at this. 18 documents labeled top secret, including 7 documents from Trump's office. Those are the documents that you're not even allowed to take out of a protected government room. What do they call it? A SCIF? I think the room is called a SCIF. So those were included. Those were there. 48 empty folders with classified banners. 48. So, look, you want to make the argument 84% of these are, somewhat reasonable to have, and maybe 60% of them shouldn't even be classified in the first place. I'm open to that conversation because I genuinely think they over-classify stuff all the time. The government does secrecy when they have no business doing secrecy. It's just to protect their own ass. So I'm open to that argument. You cannot tell me that the top secret documents, shouldn't be top secret. They should be. Those are the ones that the government actually has a legitimate interest in protecting. And again, I'm just gonna float this by you one more time, y'all. In October 2021, CIA counterintel warned that an unusually high number of U.S. spies were being killed, captured, or compromised. In January 2021, Trump stole documents on these kinds of informants, and 43 classified folders are now empty. Did people steal them at Mar-a-Lago during the parties? Did Trump sell them? We don't know. But either way, it ain't pretty.
Second, how raw is the evidence of deceit and obstruction? Do they have really good evidence from people who were involved?
When he lies about, I turned over all the documents, and he didn't, and they have him dead to rights, yeah, that seems like there's a pretty good case for deceit, which is probably why they did the raid in the first place.
I think the answer to that is?
I personally think for them to have taken things to the current point, they probably have pretty good evidence. But that's speculation, and until we see that, it's hard.
This is soft pedaling for Barr. Barr knows the answer to that. He is soft pedaling. He's not being as straightforward as he was earlier.
Hard to say. Now, let me just say, I think the driver on this from the beginning was loads of classified information sitting in Mar-a-Lago. People say this was unprecedented. Well, it's also unprecedented for a president to take all this classified information and put him in a country club. Okay, and
true, especially a country club where you have a bunch of people that come over for parties, a bunch of wealthy people, bunch of public figures and heads of state of other countries. Yeah, that's a little sketchy, isn't it? That's a little questionable, isn't it? And would you look at that? A lot of documents are missing.
How long is the government going to try to get that back? They jawboned for a year. They were deceived on the voluntary actions taken. They then went and got a subpoena. They were deceived on that. They feel. And the facts are starting to show that they...
Barr soft pedaling a little bit. They feel like they were deceived on that. No, bitch. No, bitch. No job of the bar. That is not true. They definitely were deceived.
They were being jerked around. And so how long do they wait?
To the control room, I want to go to call forwards number 2 and 3 here, because you write about, not this specifically in your book, but
this dude is like the epitome of he's like an old Ken doll, right? He looks plastic. He looks like he's never been outside of a newsroom in his life, outside of a Fox News newsroom in his life. He's totally out of central casting. He's copied and pasted out of central casting.
Circumstances similar to this from the new book, One Damn Thing After Another, that was released earlier this year. You write that one of the pathologies of our age is that people, quote, have come to think that simply because circumstances suggest wrongdoing, some set of people should go to prison for a crime. Not all censurable conduct is criminal. The current tendency to conflate the foolish with the legally culpable causes more harm than good.
So to give an example of this is like if you have a husband and wife of 30 years and on paper seemingly everything is wonderful and like the husband cheats on the wife. Like that's something that's condemnable, but it's obviously not illegal. So that's just to give a practical example of what he's talking about here. But you're about to see the question from the Fox News person, as I'm sure you guys can predict, is, wait, isn't this what happened with Trump, kind of, sort of?
So in your estimation, what President Trump did here, does it constitute foolishness or is he legally culpable? Do you think there could be a prosecution here?
Okay, it is clearly foolish what happened and inexplicable. But beyond that...
Just real quick. Is it inexplicable? Because again, the strongest interpretation of what Trump did here is he took that information to sell it to make money. And there are many dots that you can connect on that front, and that may indeed be true. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation is malignant narcissism and incompetence. And even in that scenario, if you have 48 folders that are missing classified information, that's still illegal. And so even under the best interpretation of what Trump did here, it's illegal and it's a serious crime and he would go down for it.
They may well be able to make a case out here, but then there's an additional question. Given the fact this is a former president, given the state of the nation, is it, and given the fact that the government has gotten its documents back, does it really make sense to bring a case as a matter of prudential judgment?
Now, the government has not gotten all their documents back. 48 are missing. But now he's making the political argument, the argument of, hey, man, it'll rip the country apart. It'll tear the country apart. So maybe it's not an intelligent path to go down. Now, would any Republican say this about any crime a Democrat is accused of? Would they say, oh, you look, Hunter Biden, yeah, he's got all these problems, but you got to let him go because you want to rip the nation apart? No, they wouldn't say that. And by the way, I don't want them to say that. I want Hunter Biden to go down for international corrupt business dealings. I would like to see that actively as somebody on the left. Committed the crime, he should do the time, right? So I don't even want that to be the case. But now they're trotting this argument out. Guys, hear me now, quote me later. This is the argument you have to fear the most. Because in terms of what we know, Trump is caught dead to rights on some crimes, on many crimes, but there's some you could definitely get him on. The question is Merrick Garland going to back off the last minute because, hey, this will tear the country apart. There'll be violence in the streets. This is unprecedented. We're in, uncharted territory here. We're in rough waters. We've never been here. So we got to do, for the good of the nation, we got to do it. That's the argument I think you have to fear, because I think that's what's going to land. And here you have a guy like Barr, who's been pretty vocal as far as Republicans go in terms of calling out wrongdoings of Trump. And he's making this argument of like, you got to determine, is this really the right way to go?
And that's a question that I think will turn on how clear the evidence of obstruction or deceit is. If they clearly have the president moving stuff around and hiding stuff in his desk.
They do.
And telling people to dissemble with the government, they may be inclined to bring that case. And, there's going to be differences of opinion whether that makes sense. But we really have to know the facts to see, to make a judgment about that. I hope it doesn't happen.
All right. Well, there could be some...
He hopes what doesn't happen? He hopes the prosecution doesn't happen? An indictment? What does he hope doesn't happen? I don't know. Anyway, look, honestly, this is the this is like the best you're ever going to get out of any Republican. At least, I should be clear, any Republican with any leadership position, with any status, because they're so, intertwined with Trump, because Trump is part of their fundraising apparatus, if not the center of their fundraising apparatus, like his deal with Senate Republicans and the RNC. And so because of that, he really gets to call a lot of the shots. And so this is the strongest you get. And by the way, this absolutely led to a meltdown from Trump. Trump went on Truth Social, was going after Bill Barr aggressively. But it's at the point with Trump, he doesn't even try to connect. He doesn't even try to make sense in the sense that he counters what Barr is saying specifically. He doesn't do that. It's just like, he's a rhino and he was always weak. And it's all that shit. It's like character judgments as opposed to like, let me go point for point as to why you're wrong on the specifics of this whole scandal with me taking classified information. He doesn't do that because he can't do that. So it does feel particularly more flaily than it did in the past. It feels a little more desperate than it did in the past when Trump would go after people who stepped out of line. So, but again, this is the best you're going to get from any Republican. This is the equivalent of, a Republican going nuclear and turning on Trump aggressively. But, and we should have, on the one hand, we should have expected it too, because this is one of the guys who led the charge saying, hey man, I looked into your rigged election stuff and none of it's true. So like, shut the fuck up. That's Bill Barr. That's what he said. That's what he did. So would be nice to see more of this, but I wouldn't hold your breath on that. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.